All right, let's jump right in. We're going to take a trip back about 500 years to a time when a single idea from a single man completely shattered an empire, redrew the map of Europe, and honestly, gave birth to the world we live in today. This is a story about revolution, about faith, and about one man's conscience standing up against the most powerful institution on the entire planet.
So picture this. The year is 1521. Somewhere deep in a German castle, a monk is hiding out. He's just been declared an outlaw by the Holy Roman Emperor, which means, and this is crazy, that anyone, anywhere, can kill him on sight with zero consequences. His books are being burned, and his life is on the line.
So who was this guy, Martin Luther, and what in the world could a quiet monk have said or done that made both the Pope and the Emperor, we're talking the two most powerful men in Europe, want him gone permanently? That is the question we are digging into right now.
To really get why he was in so much trouble, you first have to understand the world he was born into. And back in the early 1500s, it was pretty simple. There was one world and one church. This was truly the age of faith.
For a solid 1,000 years, the Roman Catholic Church wasn't just a religion. You've got to think of it more like the entire operating system for society. It was the government, the social safety net, the law, it was everything. In a really harsh and uncertain world, the church was the one thing that held a fractured Europe together.
And its power was immense. For starters, the church controlled all knowledge. The Bible was only in Latin, so unless you were a priest, you couldn't read it. They offered the only path to heaven. And in a time when life was short and brutal, what came next was all that mattered. The church taught about this place called purgatory, basically a terrifying spiritual waiting room where your soul was painfully purged of sin. But there was a loophole. For a donation, you could buy an indulgence to cut down your time there, or even spring a relative's soul out early.
And this is where Martin Luther walks onto the stage. But here's the twist. He wasn't some rebel looking for a fight. He was the opposite. He was a deeply devout, you could say an A-plus monk, who was absolutely tortured, not by the church, but by his own crippling sense of sin and his fear of God's judgment.
His early life was really just a series of fateful moments. He was on track to be a lawyer, a respectable career. But in 1505, he gets caught in a terrifying thunderstorm. A bolt of lightning strikes so close it throws him to the ground, and in that moment of pure terror, he makes a vow: "Save me, and I'll become a monk." He survives, and he keeps his promise. He dives into monastic life, trying desperately to be perfect, but he's just consumed by this fear that he can never, ever be good enough for God. His superiors, probably a bit worried about him, figure a trip to the heart of the faith, to Rome, might help.
Oh boy, were they wrong. In Rome, the supposed spiritual center of the world, Luther doesn't find peace. He finds a crisis. He sees popes living like emperors, massive cathedrals being built with money from the poor, and this shocking gap between the church's immense wealth and the simple life the Bible called for.
And it all comes to a head in one incredible moment. Luther is climbing the holy steps on his knees, this painful ritual that was supposed to free a soul from purgatory. He gets to the top exhausted, but instead of feeling holy, this one devastating thought hits him like a ton of bricks. Who knows if this is actually true? And right there, that was the first crack in the foundation of his entire world.
That little flicker of private doubt? Well, it was about to grow into a very public and a very, very dangerous firestorm. So, Luther gets back to Germany, and that's when the spark hits the gunpowder. This priest, a guy named John Tetzel, shows up nearby. He's basically a master salesman running this huge fundraising campaign for the Pope. And he's got this cynical little jingle he uses to sell indulgences to poor, scared villagers. For Luther, this was it. This wasn't faith. This was a shakedown. It was selling God's grace like a carnival trinket.
So on October 31st, 1517, that's Halloween, Luther decides he has to say something. He sits down and writes up a list of arguments, 95 of them to be exact, arguing against the entire business of selling indulgences.
Now, he just meant for this to be a kind of academic debate. He famously nailed the list to the church door, which was like the university bulletin board of its day. But things got out of hand fast. The Pope in Rome issues a formal decree, a papal bull, basically telling Luther to shut up or be excommunicated. Luther's response? He holds a public bonfire and throws the Pope's decree into the flames. Okay, so this is way past the debate now. This is open defiance.
It all leads to him being summoned to stand trial before the Holy Roman Emperor himself at a meeting called the Diet of Worms, which, by the way, was an assembly in the city of Worms. It had nothing to do with what he was eating.
So imagine the scene. All the power of Europe, the emperor, the princes, the bishops, all in one room, staring down this one monk and telling him, take it all back, recant. His answer? Well, it echoes down through history. He says his conscience is captive to the word of God, and unless they can prove him wrong using the Bible itself, he can't and he won't back down. He ends with, here I stand.
And with that, Luther was condemned. He was a heretic, an outlaw, but you can't put an idea in prison. And his idea was already loose. It was about to go viral, 16th century style.
So here's the big question. Why did Luther succeed when so many other reformers before him had failed and, been burned at the stake? The answer is technology. Before Luther, books had to be copied by hand. It was slow, expensive, and easy to control. But Luther had a brand new technology on his side, Gutenberg's printing press. His 95 theses and all his other writings were printed and distributed across Europe in weeks. They were literally called flying writings.
And while he was in hiding, Luther did his most revolutionary act of all. He translated the New Testament into everyday German. Think about this. For the first time ever, regular people, bakers, farmers, blacksmiths, could read the Bible for themselves. And when they did, they discovered that, hey, there's nothing in here about purgatory, nothing about buying forgiveness, and not a single mention of a pope. This was absolutely explosive.
This one movement didn't just split the church, it completely remade the world. The legacy it left behind is just profound. So let's take a look at what changed.
At its core, the Reformation created a huge split in what Christians believed. For Catholics, salvation was about faith plus good works. Authority came from the Bible and the traditions of the church. But for Protestants, it was simpler. Salvation came through faith alone, and the only authority was the Bible alone. Protestants also pushed this radical idea of the priesthood of all believers, meaning you didn't need a priest to talk to God. You could do it yourself.
But the consequences, man, they were massive. And a lot of them were unintended. This kicked off more than 100 years of unbelievably brutal religious wars. It shattered Western Christianity forever. On the flip side, it led to a huge spike in literacy. After all, you gotta know how to read if you're gonna read the Bible. It arguably fueled the rise of capitalism and planted the seeds for the separation of church and state. And maybe the biggest thing of all, it unleashed this powerful new spirit of questioning authority, a spirit that is still shaping our world today.
So that's where we'll leave it. Martin Luther, the reluctant revolutionary. He was just a man of faith who, by simply following his conscience, ended up shattering the unquestioned system of his time. And it kind of leaves us with a big question to think about. What are the powerful, unquestioned systems in our world today, and which of them might be worth challenging?